Thank you, Susan. Yes, I'm going to read a scene from my play Ghosts in Princeton, Geister in Princeton. It was originally performed 2011 in Graz. It's the only one of my plays that never made it to a proper English stage. We had a workshop reading at some point, I think in 2013 or 14 in New York City. But nothing ever came of that, except that the workshop reading itself was wonderful with very good actors. And yes, the play is not about Einstein. The play is about Kurt Gödel, whom usually now, when I read from the play, I have to explain who that was. I don't have to do it in this wonderful group of people. So I will mention that one of the most famous things about Gödel's time in Princeton is that he had those long walks with Einstein. They walked together from where Gödel was living to their offices at the Institute for Advanced Study. And so when I reached that point in my play, the play goes back and forth in time a lot. It has time loops, but you can't write a straightforward play about somebody like Kurt Gödel. So there are several Gödel characters in it. It's not what you would call a biopic. But in that scene, I actually tried to imagine realistically, or as much as I could do that, what they might actually have talked about on their legendary walks. A spring day in Princeton, New Jersey. A man, Albert Einstein, is walking to and fro, looking at his pocket watch, waiting impatiently. Finally, Kurt and Adele Gödel enter. She's leading her husband by the elbow. Einstein, it's 10:30. I've been waiting for 20 minutes already. Adele, Kutzi locked himself into the cellar. Einstein, oh, the cellar this time. Adele, he'd had a dream. Gödel, about my mother. Einstein, and she told you you should be in the cellar? Gödel, yes. Awkward silence. Then Einstein, well, whatever. Shall we go? Adele, keep an eye on him, Professor Einstein. Einstein, yes, of course. Adele, last time you didn't pay attention and you let him wander off, and it took Einstein, I know, Adele, and you must hand him over to his assistant at the institute, nobody else. She knows where his room is. I'll collect him in the evening. Einstein, don't worry. Adele, the citizenship examination is tomorrow. Einstein, we are going to make it. Adele, if he fails, Einstein, he won't fail. We'll make it. Adele, till later, Kurtzi. She gives him a kiss on the forehead. Gödel, till later, Atzel. Einstein takes him firmly by the elbow and they set off. Einstein, one of the questions the committee will be about Congress, the bicameral system, and Gödel, it's all idiotic. Einstein, it's not about your opinion. Gödel, they think their constitution can prevent a dictatorship, but it's full of logical errors. Einstein, are you going to say that to the judge? Gödel, if he asks. Einstein, but you do want to become an American. I have to. So don't talk about errors of logic. Let's start with the two parties. Seen historically, Gödel, I would vote Republican. Einstein, you're really mad. Gödel, but I have the right. It says so in the Constitution. Einstein, you really don't want to go into the booth and choose a party. Gödel, what would I be doing in that booth? Einstein, have you understood nothing? Every 4 years you go into a booth and you voice your preference for either the Gödel, not me. Einstein, and you want to tell that to the judge? Gödel, my voice changes nothing. Einstein, your vote counts. Gödel, Einstein, you know as well as I do, that's nonsense. If 100 million people go to vote, my vote counts for nothing. Einstein, and if everyone says the same, Gödel, but everyone doesn't. People can't think, so they believe the stupid propaganda that everyone's vote counts. If everyone understood that their voices don't count and they all stayed home, and I was the only one who went out to vote, maybe with you and Neumann, then maybe my vote would count. And then I'd vote Republican. Einstein, let's do it again. When the judge asked, and don't talk to me about Neumann. He's joined the quantum mafia now and claims I'm senile. God doesn't play dice. This sentence I always use in interviews now. It makes them crazy. God doesn't play dice. But because they all had the big departments, people believe them more than me. People have no idea how much of science is made up of intrigue. But as soon as I've worked out the unified field theory, they'll be dumbstruck. Gödel says nothing. Einstein, I'm right, aren't I, Gödel? Gödel, yes. Einstein, you're not just saying that to be polite. Gödel, you're getting a bit decrepit, but you're right. So-called quantum mechanics defies reason, and whatever defies reason is false. Einstein, they're gone now, the quantum crowd, working on building the big bomb. The institute's empty and mankind will be destroyed. Gödel, I don't believe it. God sees himself through us. The universe opens its eyes, and they are our eyes. The time before the birth of mankind only becomes a reality because men think it into existence. We have to be there. Einstein, I don't have to be there. Gödel, you in particular. God is the only essential being because he's the only one who is complete. The probability of the existence of a supreme intelligence is greater than the probability of an average one. For example, that waiter in Dave's Diner who always asks so insistently if I want coffee. Did you ever go there? I don't know how Americans put up with such swill. Einstein, how many states does America have? Gödel, who cares? Einstein, you do. You care because you don't want to be thrown out and sent back to Europe or Argentina. So how many states? Gödel, did you have to learn this stuff too? Einstein, me, no. Gödel, you see? The country of equality, but because you're so famous and you look like everybody's ideal grandfather. Einstein, that's just because of my hair. It always looked like this. I could never comb it. No idea why. And it's also because I never wear socks. People find it funny, so they think I'm nice. But I'm not nice. No woman has ever been happy with me. Gödel, you don't wear socks? Einstein, let's leave it. Gödel, my wife cries almost every day. She thinks I don't notice, but I notice a lot. I feel sorry for her because I really love her. It's just that I'm not sure she wasn't palmed off on me. But if she wasn't there anymore, I'd die. Einstein, if mine weren't there anymore, I'd finally get some peace. Never marry your cousin, it doesn't work. Gödel, I don't want to marry anyone else. Erzl tastes my meals for me, using my cutlery. Einstein, still all that idiotic poisoning stuff? Gödel, it's not idiotic. Yesterday I had another warning. Einstein, from whom? Gödel, it was a thought in my head, but it wasn't my thought. Einstein, do you often see ghosts? Gödel, a lot. Einstein, good. Now, let's pretend I'm the judge. Do you often see ghosts? Gödel, a lot. Einstein, you don't understand. It's not me asking. It's the judge who will decide whether you're allowed to become an American or not. You have to seem normal and healthy. Gödel, I'm not stupid. Einstein, of course not. So, do you often see ghosts? Gödel, a lot. Einstein, I'm going to kill you. Gödel, I think I've got it now. Einstein, good. I'm the judge. You're being examined. Do you see ghosts? Gödel, often. Einstein, well, perhaps he won't ask. Why should he ask about ghosts? Are you seeing some now? Gödel, when you're here, never. Which is strange, as if they were afraid of you. Einstein, look over there, a hare. Gödel, not looking, animals do not interest me. They sit down on a park bench. Gödel, Adele put a flamingo in our garden, a sculpture, pink. Einstein, pink. Gödel, very pink. Einstein, oi. Gödel, I don't mind that it's hideous. But it could be giving a sign to people, having the flamingo looking in this direction or that, turning it towards the house or the street. Have you ever heard of the OSS? Einstein, are you joking? They have thousands of pages of files on me. They think I'm a communist. Gödel, you see? Einstein, but that's something quite different. Nobody's following you. Gödel, I have revealed that mathematics contains inconsistencies, that the fabric of the world is flawed. And you think you can state that there's no reason for anyone to persecute me? Einstein, that's exactly what I'm stating. Gödel, you were the one, not me, who proved time didn't exist. Einstein, I never. Gödel, the field equations of the general theory of relativity admit certain extreme results. The premise would be regularly rotating masses of galaxies. Between them, a rocket flying close to the speed of light on an elliptical course could travel back in time. You could fly back into the past. It is possible. It only depends on how matter is distributed in space. Einstein, we need to talk about your citizenship interview. Gödel, I push a few million stars here and there, hypothetically speaking. I fly around for a few years and then I'm standing in front of my dead mother. That's rock solid physics. Where that's possible, there is no absolute death. Einstein, it's amazing how your mind works. You find things everywhere that make one dizzy. Gödel, I would so love to see Mummy again. And it is theoretically possible. Don't you find that comforting? Einstein, no. Being theoretically possible doesn't mean a damn thing. Gödel, I'm over 60. Everything hurts. I keep having to go to the toilet. Not having to die is what would be comforting. To be young and healthy again. That I would really like. Can you offer that? Gödel, right now, no. But given a few thousand years of technical progress, Einstein, spare me. Besides which, the idea cancels itself out, of course. You could see your mummy again, but you could also kill her before you were even born, in which case you would never have embarked on the journey, and so you would not have killed your mother, which in turn would lead to the fact that you would still exist, and so you would definitely make the journey. Paradoxes everywhere. If the direction of time isn't absolute, causality collapses, and the world sinks into a fever dream. Gödel, but I couldn't kill my mother. It wouldn't happen because it would be logical. I wouldn't do it, that's the point. I love her. I would give her a year of my life for a single day with her. If I could see her again, why would I kill her? Einstein, I meant theoretically. Gödel, it doesn't work theoretically, so it won't work in practice. Something would get in the way. Reason forbids it, so it's not doable. Einstein, how do you do that? Everything seems rigorously logical, but anyone listening to you would think you're drunk. Gödel, I was only drunk once in my life. On our journey through Siberia, a frontier station in Mongolia, two officials, who I've realized since were evil angels, wanted to poison me with vodka. Einstein gets to his feet, Gödel follows him, they walk on. Einstein, do you see the clouds? It's going to rain. Gödel, I don't know what it is about people and the weather. Einstein, I know the weather doesn't interest you, but you yourself have experienced how things catch up with you. Rain, storm, wars. I'm a pacifist, and thanks to me they're building the atom bomb. People like you and me, who are researchers and Jews, are creating a weapon that, Gödel, I'm not a Jew. Einstein, oh, so how come everyone thinks you are? Gödel, I've been asking myself that for years. Einstein, maybe because you had to emigrate? Gödel, but I had to emigrate because everyone thought I was a Jew. Einstein, paradoxes are your specialty, not mine. Everyone makes his own life. If you believe in ghosts, sooner or later you will meet some. That's why I don't believe in ghosts. It's easier. Gödel, and what's the thing with the socks? Einstein, excuse me? Gödel, you really don't wear socks? Einstein, never. Gödel, why? Einstein, I sort of fell into that. Now it's too late to turn back. Gödel, but Einstein, do we have to talk about socks? Gödel, the ghosts say you're never going to work out that unified field theory. Einstein, I don't want to hear that. Why are you telling me this? Gödel, I thought you don't believe in ghosts. Einstein, all the more reason to spare me your prognosis. Pause. They walk in silence. Einstein, so they're saying I'll fail? Gödel, that's what they are saying. Einstein, it all remains inconclusive. Gödel, yes. Einstein, and how many? No, no, I don't want to know. Gödel, how many years do you still have? Einstein, no, I absolutely don't want to know. What utter nonsense, what a total waste of time, a mind like yours, and a Republican to boot. If you don't take this hearing seriously, then you'll have to get back on the damn boat. What's the capital of Utah? Gödel, Salt Lake City. Einstein, Illinois. Gödel, Springfield. Einstein, more than 5 years. Gödel, more. Einstein, 10. Gödel, do you really want? Einstein, no. Gödel, yes, 10. Einstein, Kansas. Gödel, excuse me. Einstein, the capital. Gödel, Kansas has a capital. Silence. Gödel, so what's the name? Einstein, whose name? Gödel, the capital of Kansas. Einstein, what do you want in Kansas? More? Sorry, Gödel, sorry. Einstein, more than 10 years? Gödel, more. Einstein, many more? Gödel says nothing. Einstein, as if I wanted to know. You can't be serious. It's ridiculous. Gödel, you can't always rely on their predictions. Sometimes they lie. Einstein, but they say I've got more than 10 years. Gödel, that's what they say. Einstein, there's the institute already. Your assistant's waiting out front. It's going to be fine at the hearing, but you mustn't start arguing about the Constitution. Your idea that there could be a dictatorship here, Gödel, of course there can be, and I can prove it. Einstein, do you intend to say that to the judge? Gödel, of course. Einstein, no. No, you are not going to say that. Understood? A dictatorship here is impossible. Gödel, understood. Einstein, so, now, I'm being the judge. Could there be a dictatorship here? Gödel, no. But what if I prove it? Einstein, we're going to start all over again. We're going to walk back, then turn around and come back here. After all, I have nothing to do. I just sit in my office and stare out the window. Back then I was always having ideas, but that's over now. Come along. They turn around. Gödel stands there undecided, but Einstein takes him by the elbow and he lets himself be led. They walk back in the opposite direction. Einstein, I'm being the judge now, and we're talking about the American Constitution. If I ask Gödel, Einstein, when you die, I won't have anyone left. Einstein, nonsense. Gödel, who else could I still talk to? Einstein, but you have Adele. Gödel, granted. But who could I talk to? Thank you.
Bravo, bravo.
Bravo. That was quite wonderful. Thank you, Daniel. Is would anybody like to turn on their cameras and their mics and make a comment or ask a question? Carrie, you're muted. Mike.
That's terrible. All right, I'm unmuted now. So, Daniel, how was it, the production that you saw? Did they do a good job?
They did a wonderful production in Graz. Of that play. It was one of those things that happened to you as a playwright. They had a wonderful production in Graz and a very mediocre production in Berlin. And all the people I know, of course, saw the Berlin production and nobody saw the wonderful Graz production. And you realize as a novelist, you can just send your novels to your friends, but you cannot really make many of your friends go to some remote Austrian city to see a play. And yeah, that production was really wonderful. And it's still my least produced play. I've written other plays that had lots of production, but this play only had 3 and never an English production so far.
It's a shame. Yes, it's all playwrights experience this. It's very disorienting when you're beginning as a playwright. And a play of mine was staged in Edinburgh. And I judged from it that certain scenes didn't work and certain parts were badly written. It then opened a theatre in the north of England and everything was reversed. Yeah. All the scenes that worked in Edinburgh failed completely in Manchester and vice versa. And so the idea that you can judge from the text alone, you have to have faith in your text, because it's never going to be proved definitively by any cast. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Uta, did you want to say something?
Yes, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I was laughing most of the time, great humor. But why can't Gödel talk to Adele?
Yeah, they had a very difficult marriage, but it's her big moment comes in the fourth act, when actually she dismisses the narrative of the nice, unlearned, supportive woman, and tells him and realizes that it wasn't worth it. Because I felt that's one of the things of the themes in that play, that traditional genius narrative of the supportive woman behind the great genius is kind of problematic when you see it from the point of view of the supportive woman. So she actually dismisses that and leaves him in the fourth act. But yeah, here we are still in that narrative that when that Gödel will say she's important for him, but she can't talk to her. He can only talk to Einstein. And then, of course, it is also true when it's about that's not about the genius in itself as a romantic idea. It's just the fact that when you're Kurt Gödel, you have maybe 25 people in the world with whom you can talk on the same level, and that's like an optimistic assumption, and it's unlikely that one of them is a family member.
And they even don't get it.
Yeah, even those 25, it comes up in the play again and again, because there was a big topic in his life who actually would get it. So mostly it was John von Neumann who got everything, and pretty much no one else at first.
Daniel, can I ask you what led you to, I've read the whole play, of course, how did you decide to write a play focused on Gödel and then the other positivists, and then
Yeah, it was actually the ghosts. It was the fact, I was always interested in science and history of science and history of 20th century science, and of course I read a lot about Einstein, and of course I was fascinated, without understanding it fully, by Gödel's incompleteness theorem. But the thing that made me write a play was the fact that Gödel actually did believe in ghosts. And I found that just utterly unbelievable, that the man who was arguably the greatest logical thinker since Aristoteles believes in ghosts. And then, of course, I would say, then who am I to say ghosts don't exist? If Gödel believes in ghosts, that's the strongest argument for their existence you can find. So, but I wasn't looking for arguments, I was looking for a good story. And at the same time, I was commissioned to write a play for Salzburger Festspiele, for the Salzburg Festival. And I had written this novel, Measuring the World, about two scientists. And I had been thinking Gödel would have been also a great subject for a novel, but of course I can never again write a novel about two scientists. That would be like copying myself. But when Salzburg asked me to write a play, I thought maybe with a change of form on the stage, I'm allowed to write one more time about a great scientists. And so I wrote about Gödel. But it was, of course, much less straightforward than writing about two 19th century scientists like Gauss and Humboldt. So the play, again, this act is pretty linear, but the others aren't. So in the others, there are all those time loops, and there are three different Gödels, and time keeps looping, and I'm doing all these things because, because it's Gödel, and so you have to do it like that.
So, I mean, unfortunately, it doesn't surprise me that there's not a big audience for this in the States. It's just the nature of, what one thinks.
There's also not a big audience. So my favorite, the theater in Vienna even, that does all my plays, that's the one play they refuse to do because they're saying there's no audience for this. And I'm not complaining, I'm just reporting. They're like, we do everything you do, but not this one.
This is crazy. This is really crazy because I loved reading it, although Harry is right that it's, you know, it's very different from the page to the stage.
Yeah.
But you don't even need to know that much about science. It works on a human level. It's just funny. The people are funny. The old men are funny. Their relationship is funny. The way they don't listen to each other is funny. Even without the science, which obviously makes it more interesting, it works humanly. I'm surprised it's not existing. I thought it was extremely funny. I thought it was absolutely charming. I loved it.
No, I agree, it could be done, but the thing also in theater is when a play is a few years old, it usually doesn't get picked up anymore. So it's just the normal process of theater. So I really don't want to sound like I'm complaining, but if anyone knows a theater that might be interested, please recommend it.
I think you should try it for the Court Theater at the University of Chicago.
It would be lovely, of course.
I mean, of course, you know, and I hereby confess that I really never made it through the incompleteness theorem. You know, I managed all the logic that one absolutely needed to get a PhD, and incompleteness was beyond me. But I do believe that I know that Gödel was quite mad. So having been a brilliant mathematician and believing in ghosts doesn't strike me as such a reason to believe in ghosts as you suggested. I don't know how you put together the madness and the...
Well, the thing is that in a weird way, the theory of incompleteness is actually, it somehow shaped his mental life also in that way, because it would also say that there is no way to get any proof that you yourself are living inside a fully rational system, that you are not mad. There is no logical way to have a conclusive proof to yourself that you are not mad. That's also actually something you can deduct from the theory of incompleteness. So in a way, the fact that Gödel was one of the greatest thinkers of all time, but logic couldn't get him out of madness, is something you can deduct from his own work, which I found so amazing.
That is amazing.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's really perfect. I think it's a wonderful piece, Daniel. I loved it. And it's what's so perfect is that you combine the impossibility of genius confronting the absurdities of a naturalization examination, adding to that the danger that he can't take any of those questions seriously, to the possibility that he might raise the question of ghosts, which makes it, in which case he's losing on both fronts. But it's deliciously funny. It's a lovely piece of writing.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I mean, I also loved the fact that, you know, there is a view of Einstein that he was also, you know, what Germans call weltfremd, or what it's called in Yiddish, a Luftmensch, and I have argued very strongly against that view. I think it's something we tell ourselves about Einstein to comfort ourselves, and it's a mistake. So I've always been really impressed by Einstein's savvy in all kinds of ways. I'm in awe, actually, of how good he was at functioning in the world, at knowing how to use his fame when he wanted to, being pretty good at escaping it by sticking his tongue out when he didn't want to use it. I mean, you know, he was very, very grounded in a funny way. And I thought you brought that out beautifully by his wanting to force Gödel to remember the capital of Utah. And
but you see that in many of the people from this group, like John von Neumann, would an even better example of that, that intelligence is really, a really extraordinary intelligence is kind of a universal tool. You can apply it to all fields of life. So it actually, it doesn't necessarily make you weltfremd. It actually can really help you function much better in the world. I mean, you can see that in Neumann. He was functioning on all levels, like to an incredible degree. Unfortunately, also being a big proponent of a first nuclear strike towards the Soviet Union, which also comes up in my play later.
Do you have evidence that Gödel would have voted Republican, and why?
Yes, of course. That actually came, I forgot right now, because I wrote this in 2010, I think. I don't remember exactly where I got it from, but yes, that was actually, I remember there was one of the stories that actually happened and that his students like to tell, was that Einstein, because everyone already said Gödel is mad, and Einstein said no, and then at some point Einstein said, you know, it's true, Gödel is mad. And they asked why, and said, he's voting Republican. So no, that happened. So otherwise I might have hesitated to even though Republican back then was something a little bit different than today, but still I would have hesitated to just claim that.
Anybody from our audience like to make a comment or ask a question? Or anybody else who's listening from the board? Don't want to put you on the spot, but Rainey.
Yeah, Daniel, thank you. That was splendid. I have to ask this question, though, now that you've satisfied exactly my historian's curiosity about whether or not you had evidence for Gödel voting Republican, which is, do you think he deduced that also from the incompleteness theorem?
No, he didn't. He had very, he had, I'm not even sure I couldn't say he had very conservative views. He was paranoid. So whoever was more in, paranoid not in a small way. He was paranoid in a way that actually killed him. He actually died because he stopped eating when his wife was in the hospital for a while because he was so afraid of being poisoned. So whoever was more on the side of being of strong military and protection, that would have gotten his vote. But so my main source is that one story that Einstein said he's truly mad, he's voting Republican now. By the way, the argument that there's no point in voting because your vote actually doesn't count, given that many hundreds of million people vote, that is actually an argument from Neumann. And logically it's actually true. That's the funny thing. It's kind of a paradox, of course, because yes, if everybody says that, then you have a problem. But it is also just logically true, as Neumann points out, that if we have to say exactly the same election, but I'm not going to vote, nothing will change. So I don't have to put in the work of going to the booth. So they actually talked about that. So I didn't make that up.
There's a good refutation of that claim by Richard Tuck, the political scientist at Harvard. Yeah, he wrote a book about it. Yeah.
I have to read that. I want to read that refutation. I'm sure. I mean, there is obviously a good refutation. It can't be right. It can't be, but it's weirdly convincing when you read it for the first time.
I'll send you the reference.
Yeah, please do.
James, did you want to say something?
Yes. Daniel, I wanted to, that was a fabulous reading, and what a shame that we can't see it on the stage in the States. It's a scandal. I just really wanted to ask you a question about the difference of writing for fiction, writing fictionally, and writing dramatically. And forgive me if someone has already asked this. I had to be away for 10 minutes at the beginning of the Q&A, but I just wanted to ask you about that experience. You're someone who moves between these genres, between several genres. But what for you is when you're structuring, what's the difference between structuring a dramatic act and structuring a series of scenes in a novel?
That's something I have thought about a lot. I started to write for the stage after I had been already written novels for more than 10 years. And I was really serious about learning it, about finding out the different rules. And I think there is one, it's profoundly different. You need to have a profoundly different way of thinking about the story and how to move the story along, because for some reasons, which I don't fully understand, but I'm sure it's true, every effective scene on a stage has to be a conflict. There has to be always a conflict between people on stage. And that's not true in life. There's not always a conflict, and it's also not necessary in a novel. In a novel, you can have scenes or chapters or long stretches of prose that are, for example, beautiful descriptions or philosophical musings or essays, as in Musil, switching in and out of essayism mode. But on a stage, if it's not some very experimental form, of course, but if you want to write a traditional play that works as a play, whatever is not basically conflict between two people can be totally hidden, can be unspoken, but it has to be there somehow, falls flat right away and is boring. So you have to think about whatever story you want to tell, about moving ahead in terms of people getting together and having a conflict, and then you move to the next conflict and to the next, yeah, it's a completely different way of storytelling. So I also found I cannot do a play and a novel at the same time. It needs a different way of thinking about story. I even would claim, maybe that's too far-fetched, but I would claim it needs a slightly different personality. So there is a reason why a lot of playwrights I know are very quarrelsome, because their medium is actually people fighting. And that is not entirely true for narrative prose.
That's fabulous. Thank you.
Would you agree, Carrie is the other person in this round who writes both for write novels, some extraordinary novels, and also writes for radio and stage, and you've done an opera as well, and yeah, I mean, you've got an extraordinary range of dramatic stuff. Does Daniel's sense about conflict make sense to you?
Oh, he's exactly correct. It's interesting how few people there are, like Daniel and myself, who actually write a good many novels and plays. I know many novelists who've written a few plays and vice versa. It does require a different personality. It's a totally different approach. It's the reason why, if you wind up, as I have, teaching a lot of young novelists and young playwrights, it's so much easier to respond to a young playwright's work and identify how they could bring more life into it. With a young novelist, it's impossible to prescribe exactly how you should move forwards, because formally, everything is open. Anything can be a novel if it claims that it is. So as Daniel says, two different temperaments, two different worlds, and to live in both. I quite agree with what Daniel just said. I've written so many of both, and I couldn't dream of trying to do them simultaneously. Impossible.
Yeah.
So I am going to first of all thank Daniel, who is speaking to us from his vacation in the Alps, which is especially kind of you to.
It's a great pleasure.
Okay.
Great.
Thank everybody else for joining us, and suggest that we take a 5-minute break before we turn to Carrie Harrison. There really is, it didn't occur to me as strongly until, a few minutes before we started, how much the two of you actually have in common. It's very striking.
True. I would love to have thought of Daniel's wonderful idea of putting those two characters. It would have appealed to me so much. I would have been so excited by the possibility and the fun which you found between them. I think it was wonderful.
So we'll return, I suppose, since we're officially scheduled for Carrie to begin at 8 o'clock Berlin time. Let's adjourn for 10 minutes. And that was just delightful, Daniel. Thank you for opening.